Welcome. My name is Dilia Suriel. I am the author of The Thin Woman's Brain. I am also the designer of the app that accompanies the Thin Woman's Brain program. On the phone with me is Kate. Hi, Kate.
Hey, Delia.
We're going to talk about the 21-day program. The 21-day program is a program based on the latest science, cognitive behavioral therapy, that is utilized to rewire the brain from compulsive food obsession to a natural, healthy relationship with food. The program includes caring support from insightful coaches, group check-ins, and yes, it includes the app, but it's much more than just an app. With this program, we have consistently demonstrated a restoration of hope and measurable results. So, Kate, do you have any questions about the program at this stage before we go into the app?
No, I'm just really excited to hear about it.
Okay, fantastic. All right. We're looking at the main menu of the app right now. The app is a compilation of all the functions that are needed to rewire the brain to a healthy relationship with food. Every single screen in these functions, including the main menu, has embedded instructions. This specific menu has a Start Here button where it speaks about the fact that we're going to use row 1 functions every day. Row 2 we're going to use to manage brain hunger. Row 3 is coping tools to build the history of our triggers. And row 4 is use as needed. Our focus today is going to be on row 1 and 2. Okay? Each screen also has information associated with it. This is the intent of each one of these screens. So there's a lot of great information in each one of the functions. All right, so let's start with row 1. The first function we do every morning is the commitment statement. For the next 21 days, our focus is going to be to repeat specific behaviors that will allow us to rewire the brain to have these behaviors become our natural response to how our relationship with food. Okay? So before we eat anything, we're going to use the app in the functions that it has within to develop these new behaviors. We are then also going to invest in a mindful practice. And let me show you something related to the brain, regarding how the brain operates. There are 4 frequencies that have been cataloged in terms of brain functions, and these can be measured with an EEG machine. At the highest frequency is cataloged as a beta frequency, and this is the frequency that modern living, most of us live in this frequency where we're frazzled, we're multitasking, and our anxiety level increases when we attempt to conduct nurturing tasks. Our internal dialogue is in automatic, and we have compulsive reactions to activities during the day. The responses are automatic, if you will. This is the frequency of an addict response. Okay? In contrast, the lower frequency is the alpha frequency. And at this frequency, the brain hemispheres are synchronized, and there's improved communication between these 2 hemispheres. It is the frequency where we experience compassionate self-acceptance. It is the frequency where we allow the brain to rewire. So one of our goals every day is to invest in a mindful practice. This is critical to the rewiring process. We have known about behavioral therapy for the past 100 years, yet the compelling question that was explored is how do we use behavioral therapy to undo a compulsive behavior? How do we rewire ourselves out of a compulsive behavior? By default, it sounds like a contradiction. Let me give you an example that has worked really well when discussing this concept. What happens when you pour a packet of very strong red dye into a kitchen sink full of water? What happens to that water?
You're going to get some very red water.
Right. So the water will permeate the entire sink. It will take over the entire sink. What happens if you add the same packet of red dye into a bathtub full of water?
You'll get sort of probably a rosy pink bathtub.
Okay. What happens if we add the same packet to a very large swimming pool?
Well, you might detect a little bit of color, but you'd have to have some pretty strong dye for it to permeate an entire swimming pool.
Right. So more than likely, it'll be localized into the area where it was poured, and you can see remnants of it, but it'll be localized to that area. What happens if I pour the same packet into a lake?
Probably won't even notice it.
Okay. What happens if I pour it into an ocean?
You might hit a fish or two, but that's probably it.
Exactly. So how we react to the triggers of life, to the ups and downs of life, our response is predicated on the state of our brain. And what's been termed equanimity is our ability to respond to food triggers, for example, in a manner where we can be observant of that trigger without being reactive to it. If you will, to keep in line with the analogy, it is if we are at a frazzled, high-frequency brain frequency, when life's ups and downs hit us, we are the kitchen sink, and that event will permeate, and we will be in reactive and addict response mode. In contrast, if we can at least become the swimming pool, we will experience that life's ups and downs, but it will not permeate our response. We will not be overtaken, if you will, by that trigger. So the analogy that I wanted to make is the importance of the mindfulness in developing a mindful practice is that it builds the equanimity that allows us to observe the brain hunger without being overwhelmed by it. Does that make sense?
Yes. So if I'm following you, what you're saying is the more we practice mindfulness, the larger our container becomes, so that whatever drops into our lives is more and more dilute and has less of an effect on us. Is that right?
That's correct. That's beautifully stated. Thank you for that. So without mindfulness, there's no rewiring. Without mindfulness, this program, yes, you can collect a lot of neat tools. You learn a lot. You can be aware of a lot of behaviors, but that's not the intent. The intent is to actually experience such a profound change that it could be measured by a fMRI in terms of our response to food. It's a biological change to the brain. That's how profound these practices are. Okay.
What's an fMRI? It's a specialized MRI?
Yes, it's a functional magnetic resonance image, and it's the device that depicts the function of the brain real time, if you will.
Got it. Okay.
Yes. All right. So the third commitment every morning is to record a history of those events, situations, or persons that are triggering the brain hunger. Because with that information, then we can assist the participants in a more helpful manner that are germane to their personal triggers. Okay. And then the last commitment that we do every morning is to honor our body's needs for dopamine. I have had several women who have come to the program who had stomach stapled, lap bands, surgical procedures to attempt to shrink their stomach, and they consistently report that after their procedure, they experience clinical level depression. And the problem with when we're trying to give up an addiction is that the core addiction is to the dopamine. That's why a lot of people, when they give up smoking, they usually gain weight because they switch dopamine sources. They go from cigarettes to food. The alcoholics, the anonymous meetings substitute the drinking, the dopamine generated by the high of the drink. So without developing meaningful sources of dopamine, it is not realistic to give up overeating. That's very important. So one of the commitments that we're going to do every day is to honor our body's needs for dopamine and develop alternative sources where food is not the primary source of dopamine.
So basically, for most of us who are undertaking this program, at least one of our primary sources of pleasure in our lives is eating and really good food. So in order to be able to handle this, we need to have other things that are going to bring us lots of pleasure so we don't feel like we're missing anything by changing our relationship with food.
Correct. If the primary source of dopamine is food, it is impossible to rewire. The body is not going to agree, the brain is not going to agree to give us dopamine sources. So it's important to identify meaningful sources of dopamine, and that is different for each one of us, meaningful sources of pleasure. The good part of this whole thing is that, well, that's a nice assignment to have. You have to experience more pleasure in life aside from just eating. So that's a good assignment on that. So every morning,
I think I can get behind that one.
Yes. Every morning we're going to make the commitments. We're going to be present and cognitive of the fact that this is a focused effort for 21 days, okay? Now, watch in the morning, especially the ladies who have to get up in the morning and go into work, watch the busy, frazzled mind say, I don't have time, okay? And that internal dialogue is a great opportunity to take a mindful moment, and I'll describe a mindful moment. To use I don't have time as a trigger for taking a mindful moment, or as a trigger to quiet it and lower the nervous system, to calm the nervous system, okay?
Okay.
All right, any questions about this first function?
No, that seems pretty clear. It's just a new way of starting the day.
Yes, a new way of setting a dialogue. And by the way, this is what a commitment looks like. Do you think this lady
that's
would
a commitment. All right.
So it's very important. And this is the level of gumption, if you will, that we must have in order to achieve our objectives here. Okay, as I mentioned,
this is all 21 days we start with this part of the program.
That's correct. We make a commitment as to that. We're clear about our objectives for the day. Our objectives are to use the app to build our mindful practice, and we have more information about that, to capture a history of anything that triggers our brain hunger, and to begin developing meaningful sources of dopamine in addition to the ones that we already have in our lives.
Okay.
As I mentioned, all the screens have information as to the intent of that screen, and all the screens also have instructions as to what exactly should be used to enter in those boxes. All right.
Now, do we need to read the information screens before doing these exercises, or is that just if we need extra help?
I think that, some of us have modalities of learning. I tend to use things as I need them. Some people like to read everything before starting to use the process. So it's dependent on your learning style. Just honor that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So the next function we're going to discuss is the function to prep for mindful eating. I'm going to zoom in so we can see a little bit more better. Okay. So before we have our meals, we're going to prep for mindfulness. We're going to change the dialogue prior to eating. For folks at a very high level of addiction, I remember coming home and going directly into the refrigerator and beginning to eat directly from the refrigerator. Okay, and that was my history. That's how bad my eating behaviors got. So we're going to change that behavior by repeating this function and by settling ourselves into a mindful state before eating, starting the eating process. Okay, so we're going to, first of all, spend a minute breathing ideally, and where we restore calm and confidence that we're going to nourish our bodies. We're not going to be feeding the addiction. So, and we click that. We're going to accept that taking a breath between bites is what allows us to nourish our bodies. When we cannot take breaths between bites, we are in fact feeding the addiction. So we have to be cognitive of that physiology of that addiction and be aware of that. And we have to make a commitment that when we begin this process, if our anxiety level increases, which it will for most people at a high addiction level of food addiction, when they attempt to take a breath between bites, that we're just going to stop and breathe until we calm our nervous system down. All right. This doesn't happen for the folks at low levels of food addiction, but it is something to be aware if you have a high level of food addiction. Okay. When my palate changes, I will write down I am full, because that is one of the internal dialogues. That's one of the internal messages that is going to change as we begin eating in this manner. Okay?
And where do I write that down?
I will show you in a second.
Oh,
but
okay.
So we're just setting all these commitments before we start the eating process. Okay? If we're eating with others, there's a lot more instructions, because it depends if we're eating with our spouse, family, if we're eating at a social engagement, if we're eating with family, with friends, or if we're on vacation. So there's a lot of instructions on awareness to bring into the eating act, depending if we're eating with other people. Okay? And we're going to cover that in the second overview when we get together on the 7th day, and I'm going to cover that schedule also.
Okay.
All right. So here we set the intention. It's not just come in here and click, 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 click. There's no point to that. What we're doing is building a new internal dialogue. Okay. So we use these prompts as really a guidance to develop that new internal dialogue. From here, we click next. And here, we're going to take a breath in between each bite. And this function was added. This is the last function to be added to the app, because people were saying, I really have a really hard time taking a breath between bites. So we take a breath. We are fully present to the eating experience. We take a breath and we click. We take the second bite. We notice the texture of each bite. We savor it. We're very present to it. We're really enjoying this experience. We take the second breath. We savor the changing flavors in our mouth, the smells, everything. We're truly present to that experience. We take a breath, and you get the hint. Okay, so there's a lot of guidance as to all that. We're going to really truly enjoy the eating experience. Okay, questions here?
As you scrolled down there, it looked like there were 20 breaths. Is that the average number of breaths we end up taking during a meal? Or do you go back to one after you've hit 20?
Typically, if you eat in this manner, you probably will be satiated prior to hitting 20. But if you need to have more than 20 bites, you can definitely cycle back. The idea of this is to, again, build a very rich dialogue internally and make sure that you're taking a breath in between bites.
Okay.
Okay. Now, some people react to this function and saying, you're kidding. And it's like, no, we're developing a very brand new, we're restoring a behavior that was natural, okay, for most people. So we're swinging the pendulum to the extreme so that we can restore this manner of eating, and it becomes the foundation of eating mindfully. All right? So when we finish this, we just click next, and the app will take us to our next function. And at this point, we're just going to record the quality of our eating, okay? I'm going to zoom in so we can see that. So we're just going to record, did we enjoy foods that had no added sugar and no flavor enhancer? What was the quality of the food that we ate? And the importance here is that foods with added sugar and flavor enhancers are stimulated in the pleasure center directly. So our ability to discern and really say, I'm full, is compromised when we are eating foods that have added sugar and flavor enhancers. Sugar is the most addictive substance in the face of the planet. So eating in a clean manner, especially during these 21 days, is very critical to restore that ability to discern I'm full. Okay? If we are eating sitting down and we're eating in a focused manner, then again, we increase our ability to really pay attention to that subtle palate change when it does arrive. The ability to take small bites and chew slowly enhances our digestion. A lot of times that large gut that people have it's that they're eating larger bites and sitting in their large intestine. So the body's ability to extract nutrients from our foods is largely aided by taking small bites and chewing slowly. So this and also improves, it lessens the amount of food that we need to feel satiated. Eating is a form of pleasure. It is a form of pleasure. As I mentioned before, it just should not be the primary source of pleasure in your life. Okay. We talked about taking breaths between bites. Hopefully this is very high. And we're also going to we're going to rate our ability to trust when our palate change, how much our ability to trust that as saying, yes, the body's satiated, because that is the internal dialogue that we're changing. It's important to experience progress, and I'll speak some more about that, okay, during this process. So here's when I type, I am full. Okay. I'm also going to note, I am full, so it's X time of the day, just to notice, because that meal typically should last 3 to 4 to 5 hours, okay? So if I have a trigger in the next 3 to 4 hours of overeating, the brain hunger kicks in, that I can recognize, okay, this is brain hunger because I had a meal 3-4 hours ago, okay? And then the commitment is that if I experience a brain hunger trigger, that I am going to use the function one needs attention. So we're going to set that intention as a completion of our meal, okay, to delineate I am full, I had a full meal, and I'm ready to walk away from the table at this point. If you have any observations that you'd like to record during this mindful experience, this is the perfect place to do so. You can write to your heart's content here. And this is the mindful eating practice. This is recording the mindful eating practice. Questions?
And one of the other icons on the menu page is the what needs attention icon?
Yes, and we're going to discuss that. Okay?
All right.
All right. Okay, so the last thing we do every day is just recall the progress that we experienced for today. Okay? It's one of my favorite icons. The Zen dog. Cute. Okay, so here, this is a very rich experience in 21 days. So at the end of the evening, all we're going to do is I just track how did we feel we did during the day. And the choices of each one of these questions is, are we accepting of this experience, disappointed about it, happy about our progress, or other? Okay, so how do we feel about how we did today about our mindful eating? Okay, I'm happy about that progress. We're going to talk about pattern interruption. So how do we feel we did during the day about our pattern interruption? I'm accepting of it. Perhaps I wasn't, perfect, but that's not what's important. What's important is to experience progress. Are we experiencing the benefits of a mindful practice? I can tell you personally that my stress level and my ability to sleep soundly was utterly compromised prior to my meditation practice. And I even went to a period where I took Ambien to be able to go to sleep. And my stress level was so high that my skin was on fire. And with the mindful practice, I'm able to sleep soundly, and my stress level is wonderful. So,
that sounds like happy.
Yes. So the benefits of a mindful practice transcend the rewiring, but obviously this is the major instigator for us to adopt a mindful practice. So how do we feel about that? Are we experiencing benefits from that? Your investment in activities that bring you pleasure. the ability to experience the dopamine hit without requiring food. How are we doing with that specific objective? Okay, so we're going to record that also, and it could be other. Now, here's when we record the mindful moments. A mindful moment is taking 30 seconds to a minute to return to our bodies, scan our bodies, and see how we really feel, what we're breathing. Breathing is the bridge between the brain and the body. Breathing is what allows us to calm our nervous system at will. So by taking these mindful moments throughout the day, we are maintaining an even keel on that nervous system. Okay, we're ensuring that we're not going to go into addictive response mode. Okay.
So my mindful moments could be any time during the day. It could be when I'm swimming at the gym. It could be when I'm driving the car. It could be when I'm preparing food. They could be any time that I manage to get 30 seconds to a minute of mindfulness.
That's correct. Could be during a meeting.
Wow.
Yes,
I do a challenge.
No. Other people are speaking. I'm returning to my body. I'm being very present to the meeting. I am just breathing consciously. Mm-hmm. I am just noticing if there's any tightness in my body. No one is noticing what I'm doing because I'm just breathing. I'm just being very present.
We'll call that stealth mindfulness.
I have recommended that people buy a digital watch with vibration, built-in vibration functions, and set it to 15 minutes to every 30 minutes, whatever they can accommodate in their lifestyle, and use the vibration of the watch to take a mindful moment. I also highly recommend to take a mindful moment when the internal nervous system, the reaction is, I don't have time. And, I used to get upset when people, I got to the checkout line in the supermarket and two people got there before I did. And now I just take it as a clue to take a mindful moment. I used to gun the yellow lights because I don't have time. And now it's like, oh, great, this is the time to really settle down and be present and take the time to return my equanimity, if you will, restore my equanimity, I should say. All right, so let me speak for a moment about what we recommend during this 21 days, how many mindful moments to take and how many minutes of mindfulness. So I'm going to exit this for a second here. Sorry, I'm going to exit cancel. And in this function called Thin Woman's Brain Support, it's where we find the frequently asked questions, okay? So in the frequently asked questions, number 8, it speaks about the mini goals for phase 1, for this first phase that we're doing. And it has a recommendation as to the mindfulness, okay? So it's recommending that from days 1 through 4, we invest 5 minutes a day on a mindful practice, and we strive to have 12 mindful moments a day. As we increase the duration, as we make progress during the 21 days, on day 5 through 8, we're going to increase that to 6 minutes a day and 16 mindful moments until we continue making progress, and we are striving to get 10 minutes of mindfulness, a mindful practice, and 28 mindful moments. So it's a very gradual, gentle increase on our mindful practice. But again, it's critical to understand the importance of the mindfulness in the rewiring process. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
I'm getting the feeling from this, too, that it's probably self-perpetuating, that you're feeling good when you do take the moments, so it gets easier and easier to take more of them.
Yes, that I read a great quote that says, that breath you just took, it was a gift to yourself. And it was very beautifully expressed. And this is something that we are becoming aware. And again, taking that extra breath is tremendously helpful and it feels good in terms of not getting into frazzle mode and being very present to ourselves and to our dailiness, etc. Okay, let me speak while I'm here about mindfulness, because my recommendation on mindfulness is strictly to sit quiet. Sorry, that's my alarm going off. to sit quietly and just focus on the breath. So we just sit quietly, we focus on the breath, and whenever the mind loses focus from the breath, we just gently and compassionately just bring it back. So we take a breath, we're focused on the breath, we're breathing, and all of a sudden we start making a list about what's going to happen tomorrow. We notice that we lost focus from the breath, we bring the chattering mind back to focus on the breath. We begin the process, and the mind goes and wonders about something else. And it's the ability to notice that we lost focus and the ability to bring it back that builds the equanimity, that builds the mindfulness. There's no mumbo jumbo, there's no mysticism, there's no religion overtone to this. It is the ability to notice when we've lost focus and the ability to bring it back in a compassionate, gentle manner. Questions about that?
No, that's pretty clear.
Okay. All right. So let me go back to the start page. So we're just going to wrap up this function. So what we do every day is just track our progress, mindful moments. Hopefully from the first few days, you're going to do at least 12 and at least 5 minutes of mindful practice. The quality of the mindfulness is how quiet and how at peace the monkey mind was today. Some days it's very chattering, and some days it's just a bliss to do this practice. But we're just going to be accepting of it, and the whole idea is just to sit for that recommended duration and do the very best we can, okay? The more struggle that you experience during that, probably the higher the benefit. In other words, I shouldn't say that the more struggle you experience, but I've had people email me and tell me, oh my God, the entire time my mind was, I couldn't keep my monkey mind quiet, but you sat for 5 minutes. That's how the progress is achieved, okay? So that's that. This is an opportunity here to build a very rich history. These 21 days are transformative, so any other observation that you want to capture, this is the time to capture that, and journal about our overall progress, anything qualitatively that you want to express. And for some of us who like to set intentions before going to sleep, this is a great place to set an intention as to our dream state, if you will. Okay?
What you need is a part on the app where it will record that and play it back to you in your sleep.
Maybe release 6 of the app. We'll do that. Okay. All right. Now, I've got into excruciating detail about this, but these functions, these are the only 4 functions that we do every day, and they go very quickly once we get the hang of it. You know, this takes a minute, maybe 2, if you want to be more present. Obviously, we are going to slow down our eating patterns, and we are just going to recap the day. To the degree that you're willing to recap the day and you have the presence and to make this a rich experience, it's entirely up to you. But these are the only functions that we do every day. Okay, everything else is as needed. Okay. So the next row is what happens when I experience brain hunger. So this is the first function for that. What's the hunger type? Some people actually have tremendous difficulty identifying what kind of hunger are they experiencing. So this function was built to help delineate what is brain hunger versus physical hunger. All right, so when was your last meal? Let's say my last meal was 3 hours ago. And is your stomach growling? No, it's not. I had a very satisfying meal. Is your blood sugar level low? No, no. Are you craving a very specific food? Yes, I'm craving chocolate. Is your tongue oversensitized to the anticipated pleasure of the food? Yes, that is typically a quality of brain hunger, a characteristic of brain hunger, I should say. The tongue is usually on fire. As a matter of fact, the brain is generating dopamine during the food fantasy in anticipation of the pleasure. What gets the arms and legs to move is the fact that there's such vivid notion of experiencing pleasure that it gets us to act to fulfill that promise of pleasure. So during that time, the brain is actually generating dopamine, okay? And the tongue, the physical components where some people breathe very shallow, and the tongue is on fire, etc. They begin salivating very heavily. So it's a characteristic of the brain hunger. Okay. Are you able to set aside time to eat mindfully? Typically, during a very intense episode of brain hunger, typically we want to eat directly from the covers, directly from the refrigerator. So the idea of setting time to eat mindfully is not consistent with that experience. And the food intensity, the hunger intensity could be very high. Okay, so we just fill this out accurately, and we just click next. And at this point, the app is taking us to the menu where we have a number of pattern interrupt tools to help us cope with the brain hunger. So what we're going to do is leverage these tools. The first one is EMDR, eye movement resensitization. And what this is a tool where we just watch the moving balls. Our head is straight and the head is stationary. The eyes are the only things that are moving and following the balls moving around in the electrical pattern. What has been documented is when we begin a food fantasy, the eyes go up and right. And by getting the eyes to move in all directions, we are short-circuiting the food fantasy. So this is a tool to do pattern interruption on the food fantasy, so it doesn't get overwhelming. Okay, because when it gets overwhelming, again, it will move arms and legs into repeating a behavior that we had promised ourselves we wanted to stop. So this is the first tool.
So what you're saying is, if I'm feeling some overwhelming food craving, I can click on this part of the app and just watch the little circles going round and round, and that's going to kind of short circuit my compulsive need to go grab chocolate?
Yes, because what happens is, when we keep indulging the fantasy, it keeps getting bigger and more vivid, and it becomes more and more overwhelming. The longer we indulge the food fantasy, the more overwhelming it's going to feel. So this is a tool to short-circuit that experience, to short-circuit the fantasy, if you will.
That's pretty cool. Can I just build that into my glasses?
That would be very cool. Okay, the second tool that we've built into the app is called Emotional Freedom Technique. And the Chinese mapped the circulation meridians around the body about 3,000 years ago. And what this tool is that we're going to follow the blinking star all around the graphics here. And we're going to tap with some degree of pressure. We're not tapping to bruise ourselves. We're tapping to stimulate blood circulation around these points, as that then awakens the body. And again, it shifts all the energy from being in the mind, having a party about the food fantasy, into bringing a little bit of balance and additional circulation into the body. Okay. For those of us who are kinesthetic, this is a very, very powerful tool. So we follow the blinking star and we tap around these points while we repeat this sentence. Even though I'm experiencing overwhelming brain hunger, I deeply and completely accept myself. We follow the blinking star. It's now on point 6. So when it moves to point 7, we tap again. Even though I'm experiencing overwhelming brain hunger, I deeply and completely accept myself. And we can repeat this multiple times if we find it. Some people find this very, very useful in terms of the interruption of the brain hunger.
I'm watching this star move around. Does it matter which side of the body you do these points on? Can it be either side?
It can be either side.
Okay.
All right. And then some people
I'm thinking one side's easier for right-handed than for left-handed people.
That's correct. And the whole idea is to stimulate blood circulation around the body by tapping on this meridian. It awakens body sensation, and again, it shifts the energy to be strictly in our minds and in our heads down to the body, so it balances the energy. All right. Okay, so another brain pattern interruption is journaling. This is especially useful if the trigger is emotional in nature. In mainstream psychology nowadays, typically we are asked to distract ourselves. And what we're finding is that by being willing to be with our disappointment, our loneliness, our confusion, whatever is triggering that brain hunger, and leaning into that emotion that typically we had avoided for all these years, and we have overeaten through those emotions, that in fact it shifts the energy of the brain hunger. The thing is to have the courage not to run away from the pain or whatever the feeling is. In many cases, we don't trust our ability to be with that pain. We live in a society that we're not supposed to experience any discomfort. And we've crossed that line in that when we are not willing to be with our emotions, we're finding ways of suppressing those emotions. And for anyone who overeating is the default source of dopamine, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to feel better about that. We're trying to avoid the pain. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to recognize that my brain is generating dopamine as if fantasizing about the pleasure of the food in an attempt not to feel the pain of the emotions, or the discomfort, I should say. And we have to finally realize that that pleasure that the food is promising is only going to last for a few minutes at most. And in fact, after we overeat, well, we're going to feel shame. So we're trading our inability to be with our genuine emotions to the cycle of shame, to always return to being ashamed of our actions. And that's counterproductive. All right? So we have to have the courage to lean into our feelings, and if we experience high emotional distress, to ask for help. But this is one of the most powerful pattern interruption tools, because the energy of the emotion that typically we suppress will shift the food fantasy. Will dismantle the food fantasy.
Now, do I need to know exactly what emotion is triggering it, or can I just say I feel, kind of like I'm in an emotional upheaval, I'm upset, I'm not sure why, but all I want to do is eat and make it go away? Or do I need to really figure out I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling resentful, or does it work if you just know you're feeling something but you're not sure what it is?
No, if just the willingness to say, I'm feeling emotionally, I'm anxious, I'm feeling distressed. I cannot name what emotion, more clearly, that might be anger or disappointment or things like that. But the willingness to say, I know I'm out of balance. Emotionally, I'm out of balance. I'm not feeling wonderful. Mm-hmm. And the willingness to at least explore what that emotion is quite an amount of progress. As a matter of fact, I am going to add a pull-down menu of emotions in hopes that to this function, so that might be helpful for the folks who cannot name what the emotional.
Great.
Yes, what emotional discomfort they're feeling at this point. All right. So, but it's the willingness to be whatever the emotion is, opposed to running away from it and attempting to suppress it, attempting to feel better, in quotes, when in fact that is not the end result. Okay. So this journaling about your feelings, if the trigger and if the brain hunger was triggered by an emotional imbalance, this is probably the most powerful function that you can do, is just lean into your emotions, be willing to be with it, and journal about them. Okay?
Okay.
All right. The other function that's a brain interruption is this is a recording of based on neuro-linguistic programming. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to hear it during this orientation because I'm showing this is my computer and it's not being captured and recorded on that, but this is a recording. It's called Future Pacing. It's based on neurolinguistic programming, and it's it's someone witnessing and being with you while you're experiencing the brain hunger. Okay.
So when you're saying someone is witnessing or being with you, that's just whatever the voice recording is there is like
yes.
having someone with you?
Yes. It's a recording of someone that is being with you. You are experiencing brain hunger. Your mouth is salivating. You're anticipating the pleasure of food. So by, again, being present to that experience, not trying to run away from it, that is a pattern interruption, because in the past, when we've overeaten, it's been an unconscious, automatic act. And by recognizing it and naming it, we're beginning to interrupt that automaton response to the food triggers.
Okay.
All right. So all these tools, and they can be used sequentially as needed. Some people who are very visual, they really like the EMDR. Some people who are very kinesthetic, they like EFT. Some people who are auditory, they like the NLP. And you can mix and match, at will, to help you begin disrupting the pattern. So what we're building is a different response to the food fantasies. Okay, so instead of just I'm hungry and begin, okay, what is there to eat? What is it that I'm craving? And indulging that without realizing my physical body, there's no need of food. There's nothing in my physical body that indicates that it needs nourishment. Okay, so because I'm wired to overeat right now, these are the tools to begin interrupting that pattern, that response. Okay?
Okay.
Now,
it's nice to have them all in one place like that.
Yes. If the time comes, especially when you're experiencing a very strong trigger or you have a very high level of food addiction, if the time comes that you do feel that you're going to eat something, this is the function to manage the overeating. It's an oxymoron, but let me explain why. We have a goal in our mini goal to every time for the first 4 days to interrupt the response for at least 5 minutes. This clock here is tracking how many minutes have we interrupted the automatic response, okay, to the overeating. And then after it's captured, then it will record the best observed time so that you know how what the interruption, how long the interruption you've been able to manage. If you experience overwhelming brain hunger and you just feel like I'm going to overeat something, let's manage the overeating. Let's be fully present to the overeating, and let's name it. I am overeating. There's nothing, my physical body doesn't need nourishment. This is my current wiring, which is just got overwhelming. But I will get something healthy to overeat. I will get something that, I can digest easily, etc. I will take at least 3 breaths before overeating. Let's manage that. This is beginning to break a pattern, okay? We're not going to go into frenzy food shoveling. We're going to manage that and disrupt the pattern of how we overeat. We're going to overeat mindfully. We're going to name how much are we going to overeat. Are we going to have a snack, or are we going to have half of the refrigerator? Whatever the amount of food it is that you think that you're going to overeat, you're going to name that. You're going to be fully present to this experience. It's not going to be the zombie person just overeating and then feeling ashamed after the process, okay? And then after you finish overeating, you're going to record the actual experience of overeating. What was the actual portion that you ate? And what I've seen in the data is when people acknowledge and go through this process, they in fact end up typically being satisfied with a snack or being able to disrupt the gripping force of the brain hunger with just a snack. The trick in the process is to overeat it as mindfully as possible, taking breaths between bites, putting the fork down, sitting down, all the characteristics that we know about mindful eating we're going to use while if we are overwhelmed and we end up overeating. Okay. so we record also the quality of that overeating as much as, hopefully, again, the quality of the overeating is very high. And as genuinely, as compassionate as we can, we're going to acknowledge that this is our brain misfiring, this is our current wiring, and we're going to record how we're feeling about the fact that we got overwhelmed by the food addiction. Okay? Questions here, Kate?
No, that's pretty clear. I'm thinking that's really quite brilliant. Just because we get so into these patterns of, okay, something's upset me, what's going to help out? And you just go to the refrigerator, open the refrigerator door, you don't even know what you're looking for. It's just like, what's the first thing that looks really good? And just start eating it. So doing this process and going, okay, I know I'm heading for the refrigerator and I'm going to look for something in there that will, I'm not really hungry. I'm going to eat something when I'm not hungry, but I'm going to eat something that's probably better than what I would have done if I hadn't stopped for a moment first.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's really a big, big difference.
And, it's interesting, though, you said, I know that I'm feeling X. I can tell you unequivocally that I spent so many years that I had no awareness that I was feeling anything. All I experienced was I'm hungry. And I didn't realize that there was a huge differentiation between physical hunger and brain hunger. Okay? So just gaining that awareness is tremendously powerful. And then with the pattern interruption tools and even when we're overwhelmed, bringing that awareness. That's why it's a cognitive experience, okay, that we are aware of that.
Tell me again, I'm not sure I understood from what you were saying what the clock is measuring. That clock is from when I do what to when I do what. What is that measuring?
Right. When I first opened this menu, this menu, when this menu first opened, the clock starts. So this is when we have identified this is brain hunger. We're going to manage that brain hunger. We're going to interrupt it. That clock starts. Okay. And
so when you click on the overwhelmed menu button.
Actually, we came to this menu from the determine hunger type. So whenever that menu opens, be it through the step 1 of the protocol, or we go directly to it because we want to use one of the interrupt functions, the clock will start.
Okay.
Okay. Now,
so you're looking to have a longer period of time before you get to the overwhelm page? Okay.
No, well, minimally, if you go directly to the overwhelm page, let's say that you just got here and you say, you know what, I'm not even going to use the tools, which that's not recommended, quite frankly. But if you just say, I'm just going to eat something, let me manage it, we're going to encourage you to at least go back and use those tools for at least 5 minutes before you overeat. Take several breaths. Journal. But use the tool, leverage the tool. So the clock is to measure a pattern interruption in the response by delaying the response. So even if you get overwhelmed, the idea is that you have at least utilized the tools for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the last function in this menu is compassionate self-acceptance. All of these tools, all the brain pattern interruption tools, all these 5 tools, are to allow you to build a mindfulness where you can experience brain hunger and observe it without being overwhelmed by it. But that is not something that happens overnight. We don't go from the kitchen sink to the bathtub to the swimming pool overnight. It's something that is built. So while we're building that equanimity, while we're building that calmness, we're going to leverage the brain interruption tools until we get to this function where we can experience and observe the brain hunger, and we can just say, this is my brain misfiring. I'm accepting of the fact that this is my current wiring. I'm just going to observe it. One of the most interesting facets of this process for me personally was the understanding that when we can extend compassion towards ourselves and be accepting of how we are right now, that in itself generates different chemical in our bodies than when we try to use willpower. No, I'm not going to overeat. No, which we did. I tried that for many, many, many years. And when I had very stressful, demanding corporate assignments, that lasted probably until lunch. And by the time I got home from dinner, forget it. All bets were off. And I went through a lot of periods where I was hypervigilant about the diet, and then to the point to say, I need the food to cope with life. So those were my two modalities, And several people who have done this program have shared that it's just, I'm being good, or I don't give a damn, basically. So getting to the point where we are accepting of the fact that our brain is misfiring, what I'm experiencing as hunger is strictly brain hunger. It's my body asking for dopamine. It's my body asking to feel better. And that acceptance generates a different chemical. It generates a chemical called oxytocin. Have you heard of that chemical before?
Isn't oxytocin part of what gets generated when a new mom starts to breastfeed her baby? Isn't there some kind of a mother-child bonding thing that's related to oxytocin?
Oxytocin is the chemical that we generate, mothers generate when they're lactating. It is the chemical that we generate after sex. It's the chemical that we generate when we feel bonded with other human beings. We are tribal species, and bonding is something that is needed by most human beings. But the ability to be compassionate towards ourselves also generates that chemical. And when the body can manufacture that chemical, it's also what allows the famine brain, the signal that we're not in famine mode, and we are able to release the extra fat. It's all interrelated to this process. So the ability to observe ourselves compassionately as opposed to mechanistically, it's a very powerful experience. And the mindful practice allows us to have that level of observation. So it's a very powerful understanding, and that explains a lot why some people have difficulties releasing the extra weight, because that admonishment, that internal toxic inner dialogue is still fully into effect, and the body still thinks that it's in a threat of famine, if you will. So that's that. So in this process, and what happens, the clock is here because we experience it's a bell curve where we have longer and longer and longer times of observation, and all we're doing is tracking from the time we experience the brain hunger to the time that we watch that brain hunger dissipate. It gets shorter and shorter and shorter. So it's a bell curve process, if you will. And here we just capture the history of our feelings and the progress, and so we just capture that history here.
Okay.
So this is the whole objective to step 2, that we want to get to the point where we observe the brain hunger, we compassionately observe it, we recognize it as brain hunger, we're accepting of it, and we're done. The next step is to look at what needs attention. Okay, something triggered that brain hunger. In many cases, nothing traumatic. I need a break. I've been sitting for the next 3 hours. I just need to get up and take a break. Our bodies were not meant to be sitting in a corporate office in a cubicle for 12 hours. It's just, and I remember the times that the only time that I got out of my chair was to go get a snack. That was the only time that I allowed myself to take a break, as opposed to now I recognize, I've been sitting for too long. My body needs to move.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so at this stage, the first 7 days of this process, I'm going to skip this all these checkpoints. We're going to cover that in our first group meeting, okay? Because otherwise I'm going to overwhelm people with information. But for here, it's just hopefully just state here, how are you feeling, okay? How are you feeling? Hopefully you're feeling better than when we started you experienced the brain hunger. And also here's when we can determine what was the triggering emotion, okay? And as I mentioned, I'm going to move this pull down to the journal. I'm going to repeat it so that you have it in both places, okay? So it's a long list of emotions of how you're feeling. You can capture that because it allows us to build a history, okay? And then here, this is what's critical right now. What were the events, situation, or persons that trigger the brain hunger? We're going to build that history because with that history, we can then see a pattern. We can help you identify what is the life skills that would help you not react to these triggers in a I'm hungry manner, okay? So here we just, again, capture the events or situation or person that trigger that brain hunger, okay? And then we hit next. And the last step is the step of experiencing progress. The human condition is such that when we invest time on anything, be it learning how to play tennis or Thai cooking or quilting, if we don't experience progress, the human can, we just give it up. And that's normal, that's healthy. For personalities, the addict personality, the problem is that whenever an addict encounters difficulty or that things are not going as she expected it, we give up the process. So for an addict, it's important to recognize that when we encounter any difficulty or any quote-unquote lack of progress, we're going to give up the program. As a matter of fact, there's a well-documented characteristics in that whenever we begin this level of progress, that there's something called the dip. We begin the process very enthusiastically. We see results very quickly, and between day 8 and 14 is when most people that are not going to finish the program, that's the time that they give it up. Okay, so we're going to talk in a great deal of detail about the dip and experiencing that. So it's critical that you experience progress. If you're not experiencing progress, it's critical that you ask for help. Otherwise, you're not going to finish the 21 days. Okay? So ideally...
Yeah, that's a little too familiar. Busted!
Yeah, how much equipment, how many programs, and it's just a phenomenon of, the gyms are full. From January through the end of March, the gyms are full, and by April, everything goes back to normal, right? So
I can't tell you how many boxes of exercise equipment, books on, how to reshape your body, all of that, are sitting somewhere in the back of a closet or in my storage unit. It's really, really sad.
Yeah. So the critical aspect here is that we must experience progress. If we are not experiencing progress, we should ask for help. Okay? Otherwise, we do not see this through, especially between days 8 and 14. All right? So ideally, you are going to come here and you're going to document the experience, the progress that you're experiencing, and then you're going to save that information. Okay? So I have gone through a great deal of detail in these 8 functions. The first row is the only thing we have to do every day. The second row is a very rich set of tools that we're going to utilize to respond differently to brain hunger. We repeat this process over the 21 days as frequently as the brain hunger, if the brain hunger gets overwhelming. If you can just name it and it goes away, great. But, if you need help managing it, then the more you do this, the more it becomes an internal dialogue, especially as you build the mindfulness, okay? During our next get-together, which is day 7 of the program, when we come together with our group, then we're going to go over the other functions because otherwise, like I say, it's very overwhelming and it's a lot of information. You can poke around and check them out and see what's behind all these little things, but for right now, I like to stop here and cover a few more things with you before we complete this orientation.
Just a question, is the next meeting on day 7 because day 8 through 14 is when we mess up?
What we want to do is have weekly meetings. So basically, you're listening to this orientation, okay? And a week from now, ideally, a week from now, you come or you pick a day of the week that's convenient for you, okay? So we come together that day and we go over, ideally, before you get to day 8, and we get together and we talk about that dip, what happens during that dip, and to make sure that we're managing that process, okay? Also, we go more in depth about capturing what needs attention and understanding the correlation to the life skills. So, there's a lot of richness to this program, okay? All right, so let me cover, let's see. I think you had a question, Kate, about the 21 days.
Well, are you really saying that completely rewiring my brain only takes 21 days?
That's a very good question. Let me show you something here. All right. So the reality is that there's the Yale Food Addiction Score has 3 levels, has 3 categories, okay? And the reality is that there are people who need to lose 200 pounds plus, and there's people who just have 40 pounds to lose. I have people coming to me. This is my biggest surprise about this entire process, that it's what I call in the book the willpower women. These are women who are at their target weight, but they are food obsessed. So they live in a thin body, but they have to spend so much energy and time managing and saying no, and basically they have an addict's brain in a thin body, okay? So depending on your level of food addiction, okay, depending on your life skills, depending on your level of emotional stress during your day, we see this as a progression where we have experienced the people who do this program, within 21 days, we can take them from a severe level to a moderate level, another 21 days from a moderate level to a mild level. And then we can then just focus on, whatever number of pounds they need to lose at that point. So the point is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all, but we have a very comprehensive path to take anyone, depending on the levels and their needs, the mindfulness level, et cetera, to eradicating the compulsive reaction to the food and overeating compulsively.
So in 21 days, basically following this program, anyone can move from the level of food addiction they're at to the next lower one if they do it, conscientiously.
I'm going to just qualify that I'm going to say that the majority of the people do go from one measurable level of addiction to the next. I'm not going to say 100% of the people, but I'm going to say it's over 80% of the people who experience that.
That's still saying quite a bit.
Yes. And, because obviously there are extremely severe levels of addiction, so I don't want to, set false expectations, but it is a profound transformational experience, and I personally continue to be amazed at of this level of progress. These are people who have had, as I mentioned, surgical procedures, people who have gone through every single major program, and then they do this process, and they experience this tremendous transformation in a new relationship with food, and something that they can adapt for the rest of their lives. And the great part, you can eat whatever you want. Nothing is forbidden. And it's a very important process to restore that trust in that you can eat whatever you want without, just basically, no, I never have this, but when I have it, I have, the entire bag or whatever. So that's not a healthy behavior. So yes.
So having gone through this orientation, then what's my next step for how I get started on the rest of the program?
Okay, so in our website, there is a store here, and the program is this 21 days, which includes the app, and you just add it to the cart and check out.
And so then this is downloadable onto whatever device I want to use. That's how that works then?
It's actually a web-based app. So this app runs on any device that has an internet connectivity. I have ladies who, they begin this process at home. They use their home computer. Then they take their iPhones to work, and they come home to some kind of tablet. So they use it in a variety of devices throughout the day. It will run on any device that has internet connectivity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So all the information I'm typing in gets stored in a way that I can access it from whatever device I'm logging on to the internet from.
That's correct. That's correct. One of the functions here is my previous notes.
Excellent.
And you can see all the notes. This is an account, and I just keep typing history on it. But yes, all the notes, everything gets captured, and you have access to it. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, you talked about a meeting in 7 days, and
That's
then
correct.
Is it
That's correct.
weekly meetings, or
okay,
how exactly does that?
Can you see the schedule?
Yes.
Okay, so you pick, if you're in Central Time, okay, you pick a time and a date that's convenient for you that you can attend 3 consecutive weeks, basically. All right?
Okay.
And then we have check-ins every 4 days, but, all those instructions are provided to you. It's pretty easy to follow, but again, it's a transformative experience. Go ahead.
I'm just thinking my schedule gets really crazy sometimes, and I get last-minute things that come up. Say I had picked Thursday at 8:30 p.m., and I'm great for the first 2 weeks, and then boom, I have to be doing something the third Thursday. Is there a way I can reschedule and sit in on a different meeting that week, or can I? What happens if I miss one?
Yeah, this is the very important differentiation between this program and most of the programs available. Most programs online, all you're doing is interacting with a piece of equipment in a database. This program, you're interacting with human beings who are here to support you. It's a matter of keeping the lines of communication open, and it's a matter of reading people know and communicating in terms of your needs, and we make it work for you. Okay?
Good. So I can just, if I know that something's coming up, I can, email or just ask if I can join a different meeting?
Yes,
just as long as I do it ahead of time?
Yes, a lot of communication via email. And
okay.
So that's part of the process. Okay, well, go ahead. Any more questions?
My mind's just kind of spinning with all of this. I'm seeing all these images. I'm watching my eyes following these dots around. I mean, there's just so much in here, and yeah, I guess you take it apart piece by piece in the weekly meetings and things. But this seems so comprehensive. I'm really, really impressed with all the tools that are built into this, and it's so different from anything I've tried before. So I'm hopeful. I'm very, very, very hopeful.
It's a tremendous experience to restore that natural relationship with food, and it's the idea of not having to diet ever again. It does restore hope, because so many of us have diet, have achieved a weight, and then we just watch it evaporate. And we finally understand why that happens, and we finally have the tools to comprehensively fix that behavior. So it's very, very rewarding to go through this process.